So please welcome the CEO of the Churchill Club, Karen Tucker.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Karen. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming out. For those of you who might like to have the brief on Churchill Club, we are an independent nonprofit business and technology forum. We're dedicated to accelerating innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit. The programs that we choose topically, we have a filter, and that filter is what's new, next, not widely discussed. So we try to pick up the conversation at the edge of where it's been so far and to add new insights to the conversation. What better place to do that than here in Silicon Valley? Our program today is called Transformation, the New Business as Usual. Rapid advances in a host of technologies are changing how we look at business models, how businesses organize and compete, and there are few, if any, quarters inside of the corporate entity that remain untouched. So that is the focus of our conversation. We have some great thinkers and leaders to weigh in, to tell us what they see happening, what they think it means. Donna Kimmel, the Chief People Officer at Citrix, Mark Johnson, author and co-founder of Innosight, and Wes Wright, Chief Technology Officer at Sutter Health. And here to lead them in conversation, and we've asked him please to weigh in with his input as well, is Quentin Hardy, Head of Editorial from Google Cloud. In fine Churchill Club tradition, we respectfully always ask our speakers to add to the conversation, add insights, look at trends, tell us what they think it implies, and to consciously avoid promoting and pitching and positioning, and we know that that adds value to the conversation, and so do they. We thank Citrix for hosting us this morning. That means a lot. And Innosight for their support, including the gift that they have provided for you this morning, which is your personal copy of the acclaimed new book, Dual Transformation, How to Reposition Today's Business While Creating the Future. And the authors of that book are Scott Anthony, Clark Gilbert, and Mark Johnson. It is published by Harvard Business Review Press. And you can collect your copy on the way out this morning. The hashtag is Churchill Club. You'll find other Twitter codes in your programs. And now let us welcome our moderator and speakers, Quentin, Donna, Mark, and Wes.
Okay, well, this is a very, very special day. Obviously, we have some delightful speakers who I hope will both entertain and enlighten, but something greater than that has happened. The world has a new richest man. Did y'all see the news this morning?
No.
Jeff Bezos is now the world's richest man. Which is really pretty astonishing because I didn't think you could become the world's richest man selling books online. Oh, wait a minute. He didn't sell books online. He started and then he reinvented reading with the Kindle and got into cloud computing with Amazon Web Services and developed a mobility way to do retail. And oh, what else? There's some drone stuff that funds his space exploration. You know,
just found out yesterday.
Going into healthcare?
1492, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, is what their program is called now, getting into healthcare.
Got the
pharmacy and something else, I forgot what.
Okay, so he's coming at his business.
Yep.
That's great.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah. That'll be something to look forward to. And then I'm not going to tell you how much he's now worth. You can look that up yourself and feel weird. But since he bought Whole Foods, or announced he'd buy Whole Foods, his net worth has increased by $8.9 billion. All right? Like, nobody knows how that's going to work or what they plan to do with it or whether he can make a success of owning physical retail, and yet the market gave him an extra $9 billion in personal wealth just because he's going to rip apart something else probably, and that'll work out. What I'm getting at with this long anecdote is that transformation is part and parcel of our daily life at a range and a velocity I don't think we've seen in our lifetimes and possibly in history. And we have 3 guests here today to help us think through what that means, how companies can better engage with it, and they must say yes to it because it isn't going away. And then how best to work with it and make yourself part of a transformation and not be caught by it. So what I'd like to begin with is by asking our guests to introduce themselves, talk about what transformation means to them and how it's affecting their businesses. So, to begin.
All right, so Mark Johnson, I'm the co-founder and senior partner of Innosight. We've been around, I co-founded the firm with Clay Christensen in 2000. And just to kind of, this will lead into a thought of transformation, and try to say this quickly. We started with the whole premise, which Clay Christensen founded on disruptive technologies, and realized the disruption was not the technology, but it was the business model. And it led us to think much more deeply about innovation beyond just thinking product innovation, but the full spectrum of innovation, including business model innovation. And it led us to realize that some of these big innovations where business model change is required wasn't going to happen unless you had a long-term full strategy behind it. So we developed into the world of strategy linked to innovation, especially long-term strategy. And then finally it led to the realization that a lot of these strategies were transformational, and that if you didn't really get behind the organizational aspects, the leadership aspects of how to make that happen, then these strategies would not get implemented. So, in a nutshell, Innosight's about taking leadership, strategy, innovation, and really trying to think through how does a company create the next version of themselves, or how do they own the future. From my perspective, and you asked this earlier, Quentin, we can reflect on ourselves in the consulting industry and say, just like many, many industries, we're probably going to face and are facing unprecedented transformation, because knowledge, the transfer of knowledge just happens so much faster than ever before. So I think a lot of things within consulting are going to be commoditized, because they'll be moved quickly into rules-based mode, or you can get the information yourself and synthesize it without the help of an advisor. And where consulting is going to need to work very hard to add value are the areas that are more in unstructured problem solving, where there are still domain knowledge or specific expertise in strategy, or in our case, how to do transformation, that's valued in the marketplace. But a lot of areas on operations and technology, I think, are going to quickly be something that the company can do themselves.
The machines are coming to take your jobs.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Heard that one before. We'll talk about that in a moment. Donna?
Hi, I'm Donna Kimmel. I'm the Chief People Officer with Citrix. Welcome, and thank you all for being here. Citrix is a company that is focused on software technology that enables employees to be able to work anywhere, anytime, on any device, but doing it in a way that is secure and brings a sense of comfort then to the companies for which we are doing our work. As we think about that, it's also based on a platform, and a platform can be on-premise or it can be in the cloud. And I joined the company about 18 months ago, right at the time that the Citrix was going through a bit of a transformation, really looking at its core strategy, its core businesses, where it was headed, how it needed to move through into new innovative areas to help the company continue to grow. Went through significant leadership change at that time, strategy change, and then really focused on how do we build out an organization, reframe leadership, build out the structure, make sure we have the right people in the right roles, looking at all of our programs and practices and processes and how all of those support and drive innovation and change. Because as companies transform, it's all about how people operate in that organization. What's the culture like? And those are the things that we embarked on. Great to be here.
Hi, I'm Wes Wright. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Sutter Health. It's a 28-hospital, pretty much Northern California-based integrated delivery network. We have about 65,000 employees. When I first got there a couple of years ago, I wrote what I call my Jerry Maguire document. I don't know if you guys remember Jerry Maguire. And in there, the first, meaning to cause a little thought, the first line I put in there was, We went to sleep last night as a healthcare company that does IT, and we woke up this morning and found out we're an IT company that does healthcare. That stimulated a little bit of discussion, as you might imagine.
How'd that go over with the surgeons?
I don't know. I did it via email. I couldn't see their faces.
Good move.
Yeah, thank you. Mama didn't raise no dummy. But that's the way we need to start. Healthcare needs to start thinking about itself, because when you think about healthcare, healthcare is really, except for the surgeon part, healthcare is really about the transfer of information. It's all about knowledge, much like Mark's area. So the better we can get at moving that knowledge from one point of care to another point of care to another point of care, that's innovation for us, because right now we're still cans and strings, and that patient handoff from one side of care to another side of care to another side of care is not going the way it should. And I think the organization, the healthcare organization that can get those steps, those handoffs correct throughout the continuum of care, that's going to be the winner. And I think the only way you do that is through transforming your business into out of the mom and pop single provider, I know you, you know me, into the millennial age where there's the big, for lack of a better term, man behind the curtain, and it or she or he knows you better than that provider will. And then when you move from your ambulatory setting into an acute hospital setting, it's the same people that know you, that know you as you continue that journey. Everybody who's got healthcare knows we're a long way away from that right now.
Right. It's interesting what you say about information velocity and information scope. I wrote a piece last week about how really two things that human beings do very, very well that has enabled them to build this incredible material civilization is spotting patterns and sharing information. Sharing information can be a marketplace where prices are shared. It can be working as a team to build something. It can be the scientific method where peers are reviewing what is done, the heart of medical education. And spotting patterns has been typically something individuals or teams do, and that's increasingly being automated now by artificial intelligence and machine learning, just as information sharing is being augmented by collaborative tools. And those two elements, starting with email or something before it, but now stretching into shared documents and spreadsheets and methodologies, or remote meetings and video conferences for expert opinion, are almost the two elements that are driving forward this very rapid change. I check myself too, though, and I wonder, particularly if you live in the Valley, transformation has always been true. And certainly going back, to the Industrial Revolution, transformation has challenged companies and forced new strategies for those companies to move forward. What do you think is different this time? What's happening? What's been sort of eternally true in the current transformations, and what are the elements that make this different and special?
Well, I think you said it earlier, Quentin. It's a little bit cliche, but change is happening faster than ever. That's what's different. Peter Drucker used to talk about the theory of the business, and he's basically talking about a business and a business model, and he'd say, every company has a theory of their business, but sooner or later that theory is going to no longer work. A little bit like, there's a life cycle of biology individuals, and it perpetuates by the generations that companies perpetuate by hopefully the evolution of new business models, new business units, and beyond. So I think Peter Drucker's theory of the business is now that those theories last a much shorter time than ever before. And so how do you think about the ability to execute and operate on those theories, but at the same time be trying to invent new theories? And that's, to me, there's always been transformation going on, but it's the rate at which new models need to be adopted that's different.
And Donna, coming into Citrix at 18 months, what did you find was traditional or kind of eternal, and what was specifically new causing a transformation?
So, when I step back and I look at the pace of change first, I think part of it is part of what I heard in the organization, and I've heard other colleagues talk about the same thing in many other companies going through transformation is, oh, you're at this company, you're at Citrix, it's perpetual change. It really is perpetual change everywhere, and in reality, it is moving faster. And I think part of the perception around that from an employee perspective is that in the past when change would happen, there'd be gaps of time in between one change and another, or some iterations of change. So employees felt like they could catch their breath, that they could get into some level of stability, try on the new behavior, the new practice, whatever it might be, get a little settled, and okay, another change would happen, and we'd rally ourselves. So change was more event-like. And I think now change is just more a perpetual state. And I think that's what becomes different for us, is how do we help employees get comfortable, or us, right? We're all employees. We all have to get comfortable with that perpetual nature.
How do you socialize that idea without scaring them to death?
Yeah, exactly. I think, it comes back a little bit to what both of you have said earlier, or actually all three of you, is around the importance of communication. It's for all of us. We look at leadership skills, and I think that leaders are in all of us. And an endemic skill for all of us is about our ability to be able to communicate, to constantly share what is going on, what the rationale is, what are the benefits to you as an individual, what are the benefits to us as a team, how are we going to get there. It's almost keeping the rallying cry going and keeping that transparency going that has actually made a big difference in, I believe, our employees understanding what's going on, why it's happening, and how we're going to get there.
It's somewhat advantage too in a tech company, because you can remind them they've learned new things a lot. If you're a programmer, there aren't 2-3 years go by, you don't have to learn a new language, or at least be aware of its capabilities.
Right.
And learning has rewarded
Absolutely.
in a way here.
Yep, absolutely.
Is this true in medicine? In the hospital business?
Not really.
Yeah.
We had talked about this before. I think what's driving the change, the velocity that we're seeing right now, two things: the iPad and the Tesla.
Say more.
Everybody out there, when the iPad came out, they got used to, they got familiar, they demanded the instant on and instant access of an iPad. That changed the way we do compute in the corporate environment. And then with the second one, the Tesla, I think that it's a generational thing, but I think now, if a vendor, somebody selling you something, I guess the definition of a vendor, doesn't do an update, doesn't do a change every quarter or every month or something, and this is where the Tesla effect came in, it's cool now. I got an update. I got my quarterly update from Tesla, and it gave me this many more functions, like you said, reward. That's driving it in the consumer area, driving the massive change. And as we talked about at the table, I think what we have to find in the corporate side of the house is, where is that reward?
Right.
Where is the personal reward for making that change at the enterprise? Because when you make that change at home, like the Tesla, you get all these other cool things.
Right.
Much of the time, the change that we're having people make at work, like you were saying before, you get the J-curve effect, where you're going to lose some productivity and then you'll get better. And people don't get the joy of the
Right.
change at work that they get of the joy of a change at home. That's what we got to get together.
Many of the technology changes they might face at work, or at least in their desktop environment, their working environment, are probably less complex than what they're facing at home with their TV remotes.
Yes, I believe you're true.
But at the end of that, you get TV.
Yes. Right.
So you'll figure it out, and there'll be some TV, and then you'll learn it better, and more TV, and that's great, right? There's no TV moment typically in a
Perfect.
timely way.
Yeah, there is no TV moment.
in the
there's
enterprise.
There's an anti-TV moment. Oh, you're good at that? Here, let me give you some more work.
Right.
So,
Right. Right. So the reward system isn't vigilant about that. Probably also ought to note another thing that's happening right now that vectors in to make this particularly challenging is these kind of factors away from technology like globalization, or in your case, regulatory changes, which keep things up in the air all the time and are another stress point. I don't personally know what to do with that because that's just not going to go away. Do you feel like at the companies you talk to, do they feel like there's an equilibrium now and they sort of know about those non-tech areas of the future? Or are they just paranoid all the time?
Well, I mean, I think, I'm just speaking out loud. What I think are the biggest issues from a global perspective is, I think the number one issue we face with our large companies is what to do with emerging markets. And I mean, just by way of example, back to the challenge of really fundamentally being able to change the way a company operates its business model. The typical way a large multinational goes into emerging markets is they'll say, okay, we need to hire indigenous people in that market, we need to change the packaging, and go to town. But they don't change the fact that the underlying cost structure to reach the emerging middle has to change, that they're going to have to fundamentally think about the overhead structure. Whoever company talks about we got to change the overhead structure or the velocity or the value proposition in a way that combines microfinance and the affordability aspect with an awareness aspect, let alone just being able to distribute. So our view of it is these large companies are facing the dilemma that to really globalize in the sense of going into, say, markets that are fundamentally different, like the emerging markets, they're not understanding how much fundamental business model change is necessary if they really want to tap in. Work we've done with P&G and J&J and others, they go in those emerging markets, but they're really tipping the top of the pyramid. They haven't enabled the true uptake that comes from a larger population, which is the emerging markets.
Another element of that, of course, too, is your competitor or your partner may now arise in Romania or Estonia or Lithuania or
That's right.
Uzbekistan or you name it.
Yeah.
And you need to listen,
Yeah.
both to customers and to competitors.
Yeah,
at a level you
V.G.
didn't before.
Govindarajan, who wrote 10 Rules of Strategic Innovation, and I guess what is it called, the 3-box model or whatever now, it talks about reverse innovation. I think wrote an element of that you got to look out for what can be enabled in those markets as well, just by being able to take something. And this is the classic definition of disruption, right? Do you enable something that's for a more affordable, that's more affordable, more accessible, but maybe not as good? It gets a root there, a foothold there, and then works its way up to do something that's better and better and ultimately disrupts an established industry. And that has been a pattern that's happened over and over again, whether we're talking about computing, personal computer disrupting the mini computer business and the mainframe business, or whether we're talking about automobiles, the US industry being disrupted by Toyota and then Kia, and now you got to wonder about the Chinese and what they're doing in manufacturing.
So we've touched on the technologies forcing this transformation on people, information velocity, information at all points in the form of mobility, the ability to automate even abstracted human functions, all sorts of things playing into it. And then these other non-tech elements like globalization or customers having a richer voice and coming at you from all points. Those are challenges to existing orders. Are they also, and this is a jump ball question, do they also offer clues for how a company should engage? Are there elements of this change that should be particularly identified and seen as benefits or ways out of the dilemma?
I think as I was listening and thinking here, I think the other piece around globalization is how we design our organization structures to be able to tap into those markets, to tap into customers, understand what's truly going on. And how does work get done virtually, right? I mean, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, we really moved into the concept of virtual teams as companies have expanded globally. And how do you best organize? Do you best organize regionally? Do you best organize functionally? And look for ways to tap in, to customize in the local market spaces to make sure that you're doing exactly what you need in that particular country for those particular customer base. So it's really looking for ways to involve and gather as much feedback and intelligence from each of those regions, countries, customers, as well as from employees in terms of how to get the work done. So you start to create network teams, dedicated teams, and then how does work transfer around the world? Do you have design teams in one location that then sends work to another team in another part of the world so that you're doing things that are capturing the 24-hour clock cycle? All of that plays into how we're best able to serve our customers.
There's one thing I don't have to worry about. Globalization.
Right.
Healthcare is pretty local.
Right. The sick people want the nearest hospital.
Exactly. Or the nearest doctor, whatever. So I don't really have to worry about that, except from the aspect that healthcare is done differently in Europe and Asia and Southwest Asia. And we're finding in our times of change now that different is often better.
Right.
And so that, from a globalization perspective, that's really what I have to watch out for is somebody delivering healthcare differently than the system that we've got going now. So I got to keep my feelers out for that. But that's unlike a technology change. That's a slow rolling, oh, hey, that's coming. You got time to react to it.
People are now reading x-rays in New Zealand overnight.
Oh, yeah. That's been happening forever. It's not that. How many people in the room have had a telemedicine visit? Yeah. So all the hype about
Coming
telemedicine.
for the rest of you. Yeah.
I don't think that will be the new delivery method for healthcare. I mean, you got to have it. It's got to be part of your portfolio. But I think I saw 4 hands go up in this room that, yeah, I had a telemedicine visit. So it's just keeping from a globalization and a change perspective, is just keeping my antenna up and trying to see if they're delivering healthcare differently in other areas. And right now, I don't really. A little more efficiency, a little different culture, of course, but not. I don't know if you can deliver healthcare differently. So that's another area that we have to explore.
Well, that's an interesting element you've identified, which is, and likewise, Mark, when you were talking about the threats to consulting, the higher value areas are the high touch human areas, right? People want to go see the doctor and hear how they're doing.
Yeah.
People want to talk to the domain expert.
Right.
People get up early in the morning and come to a breakfast to get some ideas direct from people whom they can ask questions to in just a short while. So if you have anything in the back of your head, prepare it. But I wanted to ask, all the technology and all the regulation aside, transformation fundamentally comes down to being a people problem. And Donna, I'll start with you on this. What is the really tough thing about the cultural change? And are there universal lessons? You've had a range of experience. Is it always high touch relative to a corporation and a culture, so you have to learn that? Or are there general ways to start thinking about it and then apply it specifically?
I think there are definitely some general lessons that we can apply to any of our businesses, but the first core thing that I always start with is really truly understanding what the current culture of the environment that I'm in is. How does the company operate? What is the strategy? What is the business strategy, the operating model? And for me, culture and strategy are really equally important. Some would say that culture trumps strategy. But I think when you first start to truly understand what is the current culture, does that culture enable the company to be able to drive to achieve its strategy, are the first places to start. As I look at the strategy and the culture. It is about what are then the core enduring values that are important to that organization, and have you created a foundation from which everything you do, everything you design, how you operate inside of that organization is framed against those values and culture, which again is trying to drive to the strategy. And another, then once you're clear about the strategy and the culture, it's thinking about the organizational structure itself. Are we structured in a way that enables us to get our work done in this new environment? Do we have the right people and the right leadership? Do we have the right skill sets? How do we develop those skill sets in an organization to be able to ready people for the future or ready people for this new business transformation? Are all the processes and communication avenues, how work gets done inside of the company, are they designed to support the achievement of the strategy? And then how do we reward? And this was one of the things that we talked about. How do we keep the rewards going? The emotional and could be monetary, but it's those rewards. And I think, if I step back and look at some of what we've done at Citrix around some of those areas, for us, really looking at new ways of innovating was incredibly important to us as we stepped into our future. Moving into the cloud is part of our new core business strategy. But we knew to be able to get there, to drive innovation, it was about driving a growth mindset. And so as we looked at our own values, we added values around curiosity and courage, which are two fundamental practices that will enable the creation of a safe environment for people to be able to learn, to try things, to fail, to try, to succeed. And those became some things that we ended up adding that weren't necessarily fully part of the culture in the past.
What extraordinary terms to add, curiosity and courage. Coming up, you wouldn't have even thought of those in terms of management things.
No,
To admit that level of human vulnerability in the workplace is really interesting.
Yeah.
I applaud your move into the cloud, speaking as a member of Google Cloud.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way.
And a new partnership.
And a new partnership, paid advertisement. No. Moving back, what you talk about, though, in your experience, which are more profound changes, and it's okay to say both, monetary rewards or emotional rewards?
More profound changes.
Which matters more in setting up a process of success for people?
Yeah, I ultimately think that it's the emotional rewards. It's about driving success for the company and people feeling like they're part of doing that. I think that emotional reward of being able to get something done, feeling great about it, feeling great about the success of the company, and we as individuals were all part of achieving that. Yes, rewards, monetary rewards, are always helpful as a nice reinforcement, but I think it's more the emotional.
Yeah.
That people are excited about being part of that design of that really cool technology that's making a difference for others.
They say that in contemporary America, it's kind of asymptotic. You get to a certain level of comfort and the money starts to matter less and less for what's going to keep you going. The interesting thing is they say in contemporary America that's $75,000. We have to adjust that for Silicon Valley to $5 million.
Yes.
But it is true. There is a certain point at which people want a sense of meaning and belonging and bringing
Value.
what they're good at
Yeah.
to grow a shared endeavor.
Right.
And that's what you need to communicate.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it needs to be in a safe environment.
Oh, no.
I'm cutting.
People need to feel safe and secure. So we talk about security as one of our founding principles and practices around the technology and how we offer the technology. But I would argue that emotional security is just as important to really be able to drive the innovative changes that we need inside of the company. If you feel that you're working in a fear-based environment, you're not really going to put yourself out there fully.
Right.
And that's why curiosity and courage is so important to us as values.
So not talking about Citrix or any of the companies here, but just from experience I want to just clarify one aspect, which is if we're talking about change in the sense of sustaining innovation, kind of, hey, where do we kind of go to the next level that perpetuates what we're doing, which is important and it needs to keep happening. Then there are all the things that we've talked about. But if we're talking about transformation in the sense of the core is going to be on decline and we need to be reinventing the core and also thinking about the new, or we have to embrace a whole new disruptive innovation with a whole new business model, then I just want to say very strongly, in my experience, that the leadership team, in our experience, is wholly responsible for those resource allocation decisions, and they are affected by their incentives. They're affected by their board, they're affected by their investors, they're affected by their management incentive compensation scheme. And I have seen many, many leaders who, they sort of get on the tip of their skis ready to go down the black diamond and they stop. And they can't do it because they want to so badly protect what they already have and operate and execute that, and they're not able to commit to be able to do something new and different.
And that's where the courage word comes in, because they don't want to take a risk. I mean, they can get up, I like that analogy, they can get up on their skis ready to go down the black diamond, back out and go down the bunny slope because I own the bunny slope.
Right. I know how that works.
Yeah.
Right. And you've actually encountered this in your own organization. I want to come back to what you're saying, but you transited over to a cloud system, not ours, and just being clear here. And, I wish you well, but no, it's not an ad. But you said the pushback was really on the IT side and not the doctor's side.
Yeah.
Why was that, and how do you handle it?
It's all about the JOB. These guys they've been building servers and loading OSs and loading applications for 20 years.
Right.
I tell them, look, you don't need to do that anymore. I can build this JSON template and we hit this button and I've got a server built in the cloud. So their initial reaction is, what the hell am I going to do? If you can do this so easy, it used to take us 6 days to build a server. Now it takes us 6 minutes.
Did they think that was fun?
They did not, but it was employment.
Yeah.
I think, back to your question, I think we all live varying degrees of a sine wave life.
Right.
My wife's goes like this, mine's more like this, but I think the reward, thank you. Yeah. The emotional reward and the monetary reward are equally beneficial at different points in that sine wave. Mm-hmm. When I'm up here or riding up to the top, it's the emotional thing that's taking me there. But when I'm in the trough of the sine wave, I can always fall back, at least I'm getting paid well.
Right.
So I think you got to get both of those balanced, depending on the peaks and valleys of your sine wave.
So how did you work it out with your IT guys? Because they're feeling like, I've got to learn something new and maybe I'm out of a job.
Yeah. Well, first, luckily, unluckily, we were running, I only control the technical resources at Sutter Health, so I got about 600 folks that fall in my department. And we were running pretty lean already before I got to Sutter Health. So every time I'm able to illustrate, or one of my engineers or something is able to illustrate, look, do this, it'll save us 6 days. And instead of you sitting there babysitting a server for 6 days, why don't you work on this hard stuff? Mm-hmm. It's the same way that we sold lean when I was at Seattle Children's, same way we sold lean to the providers, the clinicians. It's, hey, 80% of your business is cold, flu, this, that. I mean, it's known. Let's standardize all that, make it easy,
right,
so that you can use your brain power to concentrate on that hard 20%. Same sell to the IT folks.
It's really,
so far, it's so good.
Interesting, the message you can't actually convey, but is I'm asking you to bring to it your knowledge that you get to use more, and it's actually going to make you harder to fire.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Build this part up. This frees you up to become, there's never been a better time to be indispensable. You can become indispensable.
Yeah, I got 3 cloud guys. They don't know it, but I've turned on the location on their phones and stuff so I can keep track of them, see where they're at, because they've become that important. Actually, I haven't turned the phone thing on, but that's how important when you learn, when you develop that new skill, that's how important you become to the organization. And there's probably, of the 600, there's probably 30 to 50 that have really jumped off that cliff and had the courage to take the risk. And the rest of the people in, the other 450, 550, whatever, they're looking at it and going, hey, these guys are getting lauded, they're getting their emotional strokes that they need, and they're getting paid more because they know more knowledge. So you build that 4A force and let them break the ground, break the snow for the rest of the people following behind, and it becomes easier.
Now, Mark, I wanted to circle back to you on that because I think your book, which everybody's getting, is so interesting for the way it addresses coming through this difficulty. A business can't declare 100% for the future.
Right.
A business has to take its existing cash flow, its existing processes, its existing culture, its existing everything that people have come to know and love and invest themselves in, and then trance it over. And how does a leader balance effectively what to put towards the future, how to shift over, at what point how to communicate to investors even, the point at which even the cash flow might change or the work might change or the brand, all sorts of things are about to shift. How do you work out moving out of the past in an effective way that isn't destructive?
Yeah. Well, let me first quickly say what the problem is, and then talk about the prescription. So, in a nutshell, we could talk a lot about cognitive problems, cognitive behavioral problems that actually get in the way of being able to do real breakthrough innovation and transformation. But in a nutshell, the two things that we have found that get in the way are, one, it's the natural tendency for a company to take and extrapolate what they have today into the future. So structure gets in the way of strategy. Because sometimes the way the future should be prescribed is not as much a reflection of the way it is today. But we take that orthodoxy, we take that way we are organized today, and it's hard to get outside of that in a typical process. So one is extrapolating from today into the future. The other is, what we could call the tyranny of the urgent, that executives face so much that's coming at them, right? To operate and execute the business and make sure that somebody doesn't die, or that they're not going to have a major recall of cars, get the quality where it needs to be, that trumps the ability to spend time and mind share to being able to think about the future. So, I think to get over, and there's a whole bunch of other biases, you could talk about bounded rationality, people sort of fit within what they know, and that's what they're comfortable. They go into automatic mode. They discount the future in a huge way towards more important the present. And we just deal every day with public companies that face quarterly earnings pressure. So all those things get in the way. The prescription in the future, and I agree, Donna, what you said, it's the new normal of having a dynamic strategic management system where it's not every 5 years you're thinking, oh, let's get really outside of a budgeting or tacit strategic planning process. It's developing that future view of the world that's outside your comfort zone, whether that's 5 years or 10 years. It's at a place where there could be a discontinuity in a major way, and begin to think about that future and how you'd put yourself in that future and get alignment on the assumptions that the team is making about that. And then walk that back to what you need to do today, to your point of how do you balance it. What really, honestly, is your core business going to be able to deliver over the 10 years? Because if you ask business units, they will all come back and sharpen their pencils and somehow have an upward slope to their business. And so that's not going to work. But if you did it from an enterprise level and really took an honest assessment and said, what's the core going to deliver versus our aspiration, and what's the gap? And that defines what you need to do to be investing in both sustaining the core for as long as you can, because without a healthy core, you have no means by which to invest in the future. So how do you maximize the core while also defining what are the seeds you need to plant for the kinds of major areas of opportunity that you've debated and deliberated on that could be your future?
And you also need that core to communicate with your customers who you're hoping to transit over.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't just abandon them, or boy, good luck finding new ones.
No, for sure. And that's what we wrote about in the book. Is it's not only the customers but the employees. This is not a strategy that says, hey, we're getting out of core and we're going into new and we don't really care about core. If anything, the company has to double down on validating employees in the core and its customers and making them feel very much valued and that they are doing what they need to do, while those other people that are, the beanbag chairs is not the right, but you know what I mean, that are going off and doing that transformational innovation group effort are doing their job too, but both are equally important.
Yeah, you mentioned Peter Drucker earlier, and towards the end of his career, he wrote this very interesting essay about the transition from the mechanical industrial world to a computer-driven world, the transformation from mechanical metaphors to information metaphors. And he said it was a transit over from machinery to biology. And I think the advent of cloud and sensors and mobility which means the deployment of computational intelligence to every point on the planet with very large, cheap computation that can monitor all of this, is in effect really useful to think about as a kind of ecosystem view. So the corporation is within an ecosystem. Which parts are being well fed? Which parts does it need to seek? You can get a little hand wavy about this, but it really is a good thing to come back to.
For sure.
What sense is it getting of its own feeding and growth in the world? And how does it respond to that? How does it interact with its touch points?
I love that.
In a healthy way.
Another way to confirm what you're saying is, are all industry structures going to stay the same going in the future?
Nothing in nature stays the same.
Nothing stays the same. There's a blurring of industries, right? I mean, we did a lot of work in the automotive industry. Apple, Google, Tesla is a new car company, Uber. They all are coming in as the new competition for automotive companies and blurring the lines about what really industry are we talking about, just like you were saying earlier about healthcare and IT. So,
Amazon.
Yeah.
I have some other questions, but I wanted to give the audience a chance to have some voice. Sir.
So, question for any of you. It almost seems like the theme of the panel was change is the only constant. But we know that humans are change averse. I mean, it's a biological imperative. We're only a couple hundred years away from when a change to your environment could literally be life-threatening. So, in many cases, corporations view change as corporate antibodies, much like you put a foreign thing in the body and are human bandit. So do you have any practical techniques or advice for the audience as how to deal with the antibody effect in corporations?
Could I just add just quickly on this, because I'm not sure, but I might be on a roll.
Go.
The 90, so two things that I think could help on this is, one, this is not about like going crazy and everything's about change, and 90% of the business is about core and operating and executing, including sustaining innovations that companies do every day. I put that in that. 10% at most, unless you're really in trouble, and then you have a problem, by the way. If you're really in trouble, it's very hard to do this, right? So 10% at most is being able to have a strategy for that new and different, allocate resources to it, ring fence it, and commit to a whole different approach, which is more test and learn. So I think, one is to not go crazy about change, but to not go the other way, which is our experience is companies don't allocate anything. Everything's about core, and they play around almost like a science experiment. It's like Ken Olsen saying, oh, we'll start playing around with personal computers, but nobody's going to ever want one in their home. And then he ended up being disrupted. So I think it's about taking it seriously, that it can't be just some kind of experiment that's happening within, but it has to be carved out to be able to develop and incubate a potentially new different business model. And the leadership, not the chief innovation officer, but the leadership has to be committed to the effort and sustain it and not keep yanking it out when people or dollars or time is needed to do something in the core. Because the last thing I'll say is, one of the worst things that happens is people say, a company says, hey, we're going to do something new and different, and let's get Joe and Mary and Fred over there, and we'll put 20% of their time on that, and they put the 80% on the business. That never works. We'd rather have 3 people 100% than 10 people, 50%. So there are some principles that could be applied for how to create new growth that isn't about blow up the organization or everything's about change, but yet it takes us away from where it is today, which is like 99% operate and execute and 1% think about the future, in my experience. Again, I don't have to talk about anybody in this room, but all of our other clients, we would say the balance is not there where it needs to be.
Mark, you are on a roll.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll stop.
Donna, sorry.
2 years at Sutter, I just ignored it. I just ignored the corporate antibodies. And we have a bimodal thing going too. Got to keep the lights on, doors open. So bimodal IT, that's our old stuff that we're running. Got to keep that going. But we have to position ourselves for when the business is ready to change. And so I knew that we're at some kind of inflection point, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but the PC on a desktop, going back to an application on a server, building servers that took 6 days. I mean, anybody with any kind of an intelligence knows you're not going to be able to survive if you do that. So as we're building the other thing and moving to the non-Google cloud, you just ignore the
So
corporate
sad.
antibodies. That's what I did.
That's a strategy.
It is a strategy, and it worked pretty good for a long time.
Take that deal. Donna?
Anybody
Yeah.
looking for a CTO right now?
I think coming out of different industries and different businesses, Mark, I think it's really true. When you think about the ecosystem of a company, it is about making sure that the employees that are focused on the sustaining parts of the business feel that what they are doing is equally important to the innovative portions of the business. It can be very destructive if all of a sudden you're praising only the folks that are working on the innovation and cool stuff, and everyone else who's working on sustaining is less important. So
That's a really good point.
it's in multiple businesses that I've been at, we have really had to focus very consciously on that, because subtly employees just start to feel like all they're hearing about is the new stuff, the new sexy stuff, and then the parts that are really keeping the business afloat in order to be able to do those things. So from a change perspective, I think it's constantly acknowledging the importance of what people are doing in various parts of the business in service to the customer or to the communities where we're serving, and that's one thing that I always try to keep in mind.
Question over there?
So Wes, you mentioned that telemedicine probably isn't something that everybody runs into, but we're making a lot of progress towards that, right? So you're moving towards the cloud, and there's a lot of facilitation to that. Is cloud diagnosis something that you have on your radar? And
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, if you see the stuff that's happening with Watson, I have a pretty decent relationship with Microsoft, having come from Seattle to Sutter. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening on the diagnostic. Watson, I just heard about this you can take a picture of the food you're about to eat. I mean, just take a picture. It'll tell you how many calories it is. I mean, put that together with, and I've pitched this too, put that together with AI that goes out and searches foods that make you sick. I wonder if something I ate is causing me to be sick now. And you could do that right now with AI. You can say, you take a picture of everything you eat, and you go, hey, is there anything that doesn't go together in this 3 days worth of food that's causing me these GI issues I got going on here? That's out there right now. The radiology diagnostics, that I would not counsel anybody to become a radiologist at this point in time. I really would not, because that is gonna be done in 3 or 4 years.
Next question.
This is a question for Mark. Mark talked about working at companies on transformation. So as you look across the different companies that you worked with, are there different companies approach transformation using different vehicles? For example, business innovation centers. There are companies that have incubators, and then there are companies like General Motors that make strategic investment in startups. So is there one type of vehicle that you find to be more successful when it comes to driving transformation as opposed to the other vehicles?
Yep. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it depends on the company. They're just trade-offs, right? So if you go the route of like investing in a startup or a company outside of the company, or you're going to transfer the technology over there, I think you increase the chances of the independence of the company to do what it needs to do outside the mothership, but you're trading off probably less ownership of the overall value equation. So, if a company feels that it can't get outside of itself or underneath itself or whatever the right expression, then I think you could go that route. But I think we have seen success in transformational innovation groups or incubators as long as the principles are as follows. And I think it actually applies to any of the three to really be successful. Number one, and you can see I'm on a high horse on this, the leadership can't abdicate responsibility to own the future and the CEO needs to be the chief innovation officer, not a CIO or chief, they are the innovator in chief. And because there will be such an importance as things grow in the new and different, whether it's been incubated outside or inside, it's going to come to scale at some point, and it's going to draw resources, and the CEO and his or her team needs to be able to adjudicate between both groups and transfer resources as are needed. And it's a dance, and this is why it's complicated, is the new needs to draw resources from the old, from the core, but it doesn't draw processes and metrics because those are different. So that's why it has to be managed so carefully. So one is you got to have the leadership, and they need to be behind a narrative that makes sense for what you're doing. So often I see all these things, whether they're inside or outside, there's no narrative behind it. And then the new CEO comes in and says, why are we doing this? And it gets chopped, or we got to put resources. So one is the leadership. Two is the structure principles are separation so that you're not commingling processes and rules, norms, and metrics that don't apply. Commitment of resources that need to be dedicated and can't, be the servant of two masters. They need to be a preponderance of their time, almost 100%, even if it's small, to doing the new. And you have to have the right governance to enable those people to get what they need by being able to have actually a reporting relationship I like to see go as high up to the top as possible. And I know there's all kinds of issues. Well, the CEO doesn't have time and everything else, but it always struggles when it's not high enough. So I'd like to see it go all the way in the top. And so I think if those principles are in place, then you can get into the discussion about whether you want to do it through a partnership, with somebody syndicated, or whether you want to do it in-house.
Got a question over here?
Yes, I can speak without the mic.
No.
Got to record it.
There's one over there.
Oh, there's a mic over there, and then we'll get to you, sir.
Yeah, we'll get to
Okay.
you.
All right, my name is Peter Meyer, so say that. I'm going to pick up on Jonathan's question, and this is maybe focused more on Wes. I'm writing about this now. I'm looking for practical tools that you have used to help people engage in the unknown with optimism. Can you give me an example?
Practical tools.
Yes.
that help people engage with the unknown.
Because that's really what you're asking about, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think there's one. I think it's just it's attitude and enthusiasm, really. I don't know if I have a tool that I can say this helps people get more comfortable with change.
Can you give an example?
One of the killer apps I think that's coming out right now in the non-Google Cloud place that I live
For now.
is Microsoft Teams. It's really Slack on steroids. And I think that is going to be oh, hey, everything's contained right here. I'm used to working in a small team. I know who the team members are, and we can work together in this team. So that's kind of setting up that virtual team to where they're comfortable with the people that they're working with and the tasks that they're on. But the whole time that they're doing that, they're using a brand new application in brand new ways. So somewhat insidiously, I'm teaching them to do change by having them change in a way that they find pleasurable. I guess that's the best I can come up with.
It may be glib, but in addition to collaborative tools, which cloud services offer, other services offer, but their collaborative tools are very useful as people want to educate each other. There is also just this incredible wealth of online video now. And that may sound, like I say, glib, but if you go out there and sort of find simple training tools people can look at and educate themselves with at home and get a clue about things, sort of pick 4 or 5 you like and point them to people, that can be very useful. And they can be very elementary and they can be very sophisticated. You go to YouTube, you go to other outlets, just search online under video for certain training mechanisms. Find the ones you like and point to it. That'll help people get a toehold without having to admit publicly they don't know how to do something and put themselves up to that uncertainty in public.
Could I add one that maybe this is not much a tool as a principle, that again, principles can be really powerful, that then lead to the tools that you need, is so many companies tend over time to become very inside out. They end up thinking they know what the customer wants, and it sort of works, again, for the core. But if you're trying to do the new and different, you'll be dead on arrival, because you've got to be outside in. You've got to be consumer, customer-centric. And, and I'll cite my good friend, well, I don't know if he's good friends, but our friend Scott Cook of Intuit, who has a great, we videotaped him talking about his disruptive teams, and I think he nailed it. That might help for teams trying to do the unknown. He said, what I tell my disruptive teams is to forget about the volume forecasting. You can do it, put it on the back of an envelope, but the only thing we know about any of these things we're trying to do with numbers are they're wrong. We just don't know in what direction. He said what he advises his teams is to, one, how deep is the customer problem? Number one. And number two is, do we have some kind of solution that might address that customer problem that is important and is unmet, right? Because you can have an important problem, and if it's well met, you've got lots of competition, and what's the point? But if you can find those customer problems that are deep and unmet, and you have a reasonable solution to address that, if both of those are strong, you have a viable chance at a business, to paraphrase him. If either of those are weak, it doesn't matter what the volume forecasting is, you don't have a business. And so I think I go back to, we could get wrapped around all these different technologies, tools, and techniques. But again, our friend Peter Drucker would say, why is somebody in business? It's to create a customer. And we have to go back to the whole purpose of all of this in the first place, which is to serve a customer who has a problem or a job to be done that we're trying to find that's important and that's not currently being met well. And I think that's where the opportunity is for companies to be able to find, the unknown of, or going beyond what they're doing today.
Next question.
We discussed quite a bit about that 90% of the time is spent on operate, execute, and sustaining innovation, and the balance 10% is likely spent on more breakthrough technologies, breakthrough innovation. And in the past 20 years, what we have seen is that there is a lot of democratization of information, and ideas are coming from all angles. So what are some of the ways that organizations are dealing with? I mean, how do you empower employees? How do you incubate ideas? How do you kind of develop a pipeline of ideas which would be converted into a concept and then eventually lead to some breakthrough innovation?
I think that there are, a bit of it comes back to a little bit of what I said earlier in terms of providing all employees an opportunity to be able to, through their own curiosity, through their own courage to try, to learn, to experiment with something, fail, experiment again, succeed. There's opportunities for that. That we want people to use in their day-to-day work, regardless of whether or not they're in a sustaining business or they're working on innovation. I think on the innovation side, I think predominance is about ring fencing and making sure that we've got the right commitment, the right resources, the right leadership helping to drive that, because its focus is about innovating. Its focus is about understanding true to what the customer is really looking for, and being able to experiment, get feedback, come back, try again. But I think it does need to be ring fenced and supported.
Another fairly simple practice is online collaboration tools. Again, documents among a team, but then occasionally efforts by management to take questions from everywhere that have been posted in a collaborative environment, and other members of the company can vote on them. Yeah. And that way, the points can come from anywhere. There's a democratic choice of what gets answered, and the CEO exhibits a certain fearlessness and leadership in taking those questions. Fairly simple practice that has enormous sense of listening and communicating about a collective identity inside the company.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
Hi, I have a question from an educator's point of view. So I'm a professor of information systems at San Jose State University, and the two words that really resonated with me today are creativity and courage. And I was wondering whether you have any thoughts about what needs to change in our education system, so we actually teach some of that to our students.
Can I go? I think there actually is a very important thing we have to learn how to teach here that is a social good as well. And it's probably easier to teach in Silicon Valley than anywhere else, but we need it in the whole company, in the whole country rather. And that is the realization, the inculcation that it's okay to be wrong. That when you're wrong, you're starting to learn something new. Mm-hmm. And that's actually a really good thing. And people in the Valley kind of get that because they've had a lot of academic success over their life. And getting the math problem wrong 5 times, they learned was the road to that 8th time when you got it right and really understood the principle. But we need to do that very, very broadly. That being wrong, engaging with hard things, not getting them instantly, is actually a strength, because that's a sign that you are really engaging with change and there's going to be a positive reinforcement. I think part of the difficulty in our social and politics side right now is the inability to listen to other people, because there's so much information coming at you, you don't want the confusion of being wrong and maybe changing your point of view. So we built these echo chambers of having your point of view reinforced, and it isn't helping the democracy. So that's my big thought for the morning.
I would add to that, bravo. Absolutely. I think it is really important for us to have a bit of a sense of humility to be able to acknowledge when we don't know an answer to something. And I think coming up through the school system is one great place to be able to learn that. Just on a very personal example, if I think back to my days in high school, right? I happened to be in people and organizations, but my favorite subject in school was physics. And I loved physics because of my teacher. And he was all about learning and all about growth, and it was less about the grade. What this particular teacher did with us was if you weren't happy with the score you got on your test, or you weren't happy with the answers you got, you could just volunteer. It was self-select. You could volunteer to come in and work with him after school, and so we played what he called baseball. And you'd work your way around answering different questions, learning from how you might have articulated something differently. And for him, it was all about learning. And I think we need more people like that who drive the value of learning rather than the value of a grade.
We have time for 2 more questions. Next question there.
Hi, Jake Kalpathy from Netline. Question for Wes. So a friend of mine is trying to address the issue of maternal health care in Kenya. And he's dealing with things where the price point for delivering care for a pregnancy is $200, and he's trying to bring it down to $75 because when it comes to that price point, people will actually come in for the health care and not just let it slide. And at the same time, doctors from Kenya are leaving the country because they're getting paid better in England or other places. Do you think that innovation in telemedicine and things like that is going to first hit in those places where someone's trying to deliver medicine at a much lower cost?
Absolutely. And a place where they don't have 100 years worth of this is the way we do medicine in the way, the Socratic method that we practice medicine. I think the developing countries are going to be where that new way of practicing medicine is coming from, because somebody on the panel remarked, if you get too caught up in your core, or you get focused on the inside rather than the outside, those folks are just trying to pick out, they don't have an inside. So they're just trying to pick out the best of whatever they can to deliver healthcare the most inexpensively possible. So I think the way that healthcare is delivered in the U.S. is going to be greatly affected by the nations like Kenya, like Ghana, like all the countries that have to develop a health care type of system. That's where the change in our system is going to come from. But yeah, I think a huge way that they'll solve that issue is through the telemedicine, not the video consult, but the other kind of telehealth.
Last question? Do we have a last question? Ah.
Right behind you.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for the conversation today. I guess the question I have is, we live in a connected world today, right? And we and delivering a experience to a customer, any customer, is very critical. So what are your thoughts about leveraging the ecosystem to deliver that experience? I know we talked about, you mentioned about the vendors. I mean, even your competitors could be part of your ecosystem to go deliver. So what are your thoughts in today's connected world about leveraging that ecosystem?
Well, as I understand the question, it's that as we move intelligence, computer-assisted intelligence, which is really the leveraging of human intention at scale to every point on the planet, how can we deliver products that are appropriate to a consumer and responsive to their needs and environments, so that the product stands for a kind of emotional valence as well, as a kind of experience. And we're doing that in some ways now. If you look at a phone or a Tesla, it's a really interesting product because it's perfectly engineered, but it's also waiting to engage with you so it can change. You know, we actually have physical objects that expect to change, and that'll happen on factories where machines will begin to understand their environment and interact with their people. perhaps even to help train them in new skills as they operate those machines. Or I know people who make 3D printers, and they watch how the printers are being used in the field in order to change the mix of the resins that are used in hardening. So that what I'm talking about here, in a sense, is this wonderful underutilized human capability of effective listening. And you build up the listening skill and the awareness, because what do people want? They want their needs satisfied, and they want to be looked in the eye. They want to be understood for who they are in particular. And when you deliver that, you win them for life.
Yeah. No, I mean, one thing I would add, just at a little bit of an angle, but I think saying a similar thing is, our observation is, in kind of the world of products and services and the basis of competition, the automotive industry went from functionality to reliability with the whole quality movement to where we are today. And when we've advised automotive companies, is the economy's really moved to a convenience economy, right? Like how do you wear your automobile? How do you make it customized for you? In fact, not even the automobile, how do you customize mobility and personalize it and make it convenient? And that's where the basis of competition is shifting, I think, for so many industries, enabled by technology and where we are. But how do you make so much of the offerings in the world of personalization and convenience to really come up with something that's truly differentiated is what, I mean, I know I'm generalizing, but we see that as sort of a common thread back to patterns that's happening. Again, both because of where we've been in terms of industrialization and the evolution to date, and what the technology enables. I mean, just as when I wrote in Seizing the White Space, was my book on business model innovation. This is dated now, but Apple was not the first with the iPod of MP3 technology. There was Cabo, there was Creative, there was Rio, there was a whole set. But they won based on convenience, not necessarily on the design of the iPad, because they integrated software with service, the iTunes and the iPod, to really create an easy, seamless experience to download music onto your
The rest
machine.
of them were selling, we have 2 gigs. They
Yeah.
sold, we have 10,000 songs in your pocket.
Exactly. And we can get it to your device in a very easy way when everybody else made it a very complicated process.
Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you, panel. Karen, you want to bring it home?
Thank you very much on behalf of our audience for sharing your perspectives so freely and candidly. We really do appreciate it. As a gift for you, we have, of course, the exclusive Churchill Club speaker T-shirt.
Sweet.
Right.
I hope you wear that in good health.
I got this last
Just
time.
a couple of closing announcements. Don't forget to pick up your book. A recording of this program will be available on our YouTube channel soon, where you will find recordings of most of our other programs as well. Hope that you find that to be a useful resource. One of our programs coming up is on September 14. It is called The Churchills, and it is a very special program, different from everything else that we do. And it is designed to, I think, reconnect us with our curiosity and our courage and our humanity around themes that we all care about: innovation and collaboration, societal benefit, and leadership. And we have one awardee. It's really not an award. We're actually asking them to come and give back. We have one to announce, and that is that our magical team this year will be the Golden State Warriors.
All right.
So stay tuned for other announcements there. You have been a wonderful audience. It is our privilege to serve you. Thank you so much. Hope to see you again soon. Good day.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.